The thing about crawling through other people's houses is that you hear things you're not supposed to hear. That's what I was thinking when I squeezed myself through the access panel behind Julian Trent's wine cellar, my headlamp cutting through the darkness like a surgical blade. The air down here smelled like money, expensive wood, climate-controlled perfection, and just a hint of the boric acid I'd dusted along the foundation 3 months back. Before we dive deeper into this story, I have one small request. Please subscribe, drop a like, comment, and hit that hype button to boost this channel so more people can discover these incredible Reddit stories. I'm Arthur Vance. I things for a living. Not people, though after what I was about to hear, I'd consider expanding my services. I run Vance Pest Control, which means I've got keys and codes to half the mansions in this sweating armpit of a city. When you're the exterminator, you're invisible. You're the guy who shows up, does his job in the walls and crawl spaces and leaves. Nobody thinks about you. Nobody sees you. You're just the bug man. That's what makes it perfect. I was checking the bait stations I'd installed near the HVAC system when I heard the voices filtering through the vent above my head. The first voice I recognized immediately. My wife, Corinne. The second took me a moment, but when it clicked, my stomach dropped like I'd swallowed a brick. Julian Trent, my client, the guy whose house I was currently crouched inside like a rat. He's so pathetic, Corinne was saying, and I could hear the smile in her voice. That cruel little upturn she got when she was feeling superior. I swear to God, Julian, he came home yesterday smelling like sulfur and he actually tried to kiss me. Julian laughed. It was the kind of laugh rich people do. Not because something's funny, but because they're used to people laughing at their jokes. The bug man? Jesus, Corinne. How did you ever end up with someone like that? I should have moved. Should have backed out of that crawl space and pretended I'd never heard a thing. But I didn't. I stayed frozen, my knee grinding into the concrete, my breath shallow and hot inside my respirator mask. Young and stupid, Corinne said. He seemed solid back then. Blue collar, you know. But God, Julian, he's so small-minded. Everything's about his little business, his little van, his little chemicals. Meanwhile, I'm stuck in that tiny house he bought before we even met. You know what he said when I suggested we upgrade? He said pest control was seasonal and we needed to build reserves. She said it in a mocking voice, and they both laughed. My hands were shaking. Not from fear, from rage. Pure, distilled fury that made my vision tunnel and my jaw ache from clenching. I fumbled for my phone, pulled up the voice recorder app, and hit the red button. Well, you won't have to worry about that much longer, Julian said. His voice had that smug satisfaction rich guys get when they're about to describe their latest conquest. My lawyer's a shark. We'll file first, claim he's been financially irresponsible, maybe even suggest some substance issues. By the time we're done, he'll be lucky to keep that ratty van. Everything else, the house, the business assets, whatever savings he's got squirreled away, it's yours, which means it's ours. You're terrible, Corinne purred, but she didn't sound like she disapproved. I'm practical. We need that money for Cabo. The villa I'm looking at is 40 grand for the month, and I want to do this right. Besides, it'll be nice to have you officially free. Ashley's getting suspicious, and I'm tired of sneaking around. Ashley, Julian's wife, Corinne's best friend. My hand tightened around my phone until the case creaked. She won't find out, Corinne said. She's too trusting, too stupid. Just like the bug man, Julian said, and they both laughed again. I backed out of that crawl space slowly, methodically, the way I'd been trained. Every movement calculated. I pulled myself up through the access panel, sealed it behind me, and walked through Julian's pristine house like a ghost. My boots left no marks on his Italian marble. My hands touched nothing but the doorknob on my way out. The August heat hit me like a physical force when I stepped outside. The air was thick, humid, pressing down with the weight of an oncoming storm. My van sat in the circular driveway, baking in the sun. I climbed inside, stripped off my respirator, and sat there in the leather seat that smelled like pesticide and sweat. The recording was still running on my phone. I stopped it, saved it, backed it up to 3 different cloud services. Then I drove home. Our house, my house, bought and paid for before I ever met Corinne, sat on the working-class side of town. Small, practical, with aluminum siding that needed painting, and a yard I never had time to mow. I'd always thought it was enough. Corinne had made it clear it wasn't. I parked the van, grabbed a beer from the fridge, and sat on the back porch. The sun was setting, turning the sky the color of a bruise. My phone buzzed. A text from Corinne. "At Melissa's tonight, girls' night, don't wait up." I smiled, took a long pull from my beer, then I waited. The call came at 9:30. I knew it would. I could picture it perfectly. Corinne, drunk on wine and her own sense of invincibility, deciding tonight was the night she'd twist the knife a little deeper. Maybe she thought I'd beg. Maybe she thought I'd cry. I answered on the 3rd ring. "Arthur!" Her voice was bright, performative. I could hear music and laughter in the background. "Guess what? I've made a decision." "Yeah?" I kept my voice flat, bored. "I'm filing for divorce. Like, officially. This week." She giggled. "I'm just so done, you know. Done with the smell, done with the van, done with you coming home looking like you crawled through a sewer." "I get it," I said. "Oh, don't sound so wounded. This has been coming for months. You've known it. I've known it, and honestly, I'm excited. I'm finally going to have the life I deserve." The background noise swelled. Someone was shouting something about shots. "Sounds like quite the party," I said. "Who's there?" "Just the girls. Melissa, Tanya, Ashley." She paused, and I could hear the smile in her voice. "Actually, you want to hear how done I am? How little I care what you think anymore?" "Sure. Listen to this." The phone shifted. Suddenly I was on speaker, and the party noise got louder. "Everyone," Corinne announced. "Arthur's on the phone. I'm telling him right now that I'm divorcing him. What do you think?" Cheers. Actual cheering. Someone yelled, "Good for you, girl." Another voice, Melissa probably, said, "About damn time." Then I heard it. A specific laugh, slightly nervous, higher pitched than the others. "Is that Ashley?" I asked. The laughter didn't stop, but there was a beat of confusion. Corinne came back on, no longer on speaker. "What?" "Yeah, Ashley's here. Why?" "Just wanted to make sure," I said. My voice was still flat, calm. "I wanted to make sure Ashley was there when I told you something." "Told me what?" I took a breath. Let the moment stretch. Somewhere in the distance, thunder rumbled. "Guess she didn't hear yet that you've been dating her husband, Julian. Or about that villa in Cabo you booked on his business card. 40,000 for the month, right? That's what he said when I heard you two in his house this afternoon." Silence. Complete, absolute silence. I could picture it. Corinne's face going white. The phone in her hand. The other women staring at her, trying to process what they'd just heard through the speaker she'd forgotten to turn off. Then Ashley's voice, distant but clear. "What did he just say?" "Nothing," Corinne said quickly. "He's lying. What did he say about Julian?" The sound of shattering glass. Someone screaming. Multiple voices overlapping, rising in pitch and volume. Corinne was saying something, but it was drowned out by Ashley shrieking her name over and over. The line went. I crushed the beer can in my fist, tossed it in the recycling bin, and smiled. "Let the fumigation begin," I said to no one. I went inside, packed a duffel bag with clothes and essentials, grabbed my laptop and the backup drive with all my business files. The house suddenly felt contaminated, like it was full of poison I needed to escape. I loaded everything into the van, locked the door behind me, and drove to a motel on the industrial side of town. The kind of place where they don't ask questions if you pay cash. The room smelled like cigarettes and disinfectant. The bed was hard. The walls were thin enough that I could hear the couple next door arguing about money. I didn't care. I lay on top of the covers, staring at the water-stained ceiling, and felt something cold and sharp settling into place behind my ribs. I'd spent 10 years building my business. 10 years crawling through attics and basements, breathing poison, dealing with rats and roaches, and the occasional possum rotting in somebody's wall. I'd done it because it was honest work, because I was good at it, because I thought I was building something. And all that time, Corinne had been counting down the days until she could take it all and run. Not anymore. I pulled out my phone, opened my client database, and started scrolling through names. I had keys to 47 properties, access codes to 39 security systems. I knew which houses had crawl spaces, which had attics, which had walls thick enough to hide in. I knew schedules, when people left for work, when they came home, when they went on vacation. I knew everything. My phone buzzed, a text from a number I didn't recognize. "We need to talk. This is Julian." I deleted it. Another buzz. This time it was Corinne. "You asshole! You ruined everything." I blocked her number. Outside, the storm finally broke. Rain hammered against the motel window, and lightning turned the parking lot strobes of white. I could see my van sitting out there, loaded with chemicals and equipment. My tools. I'd been the invisible man for 10 years, the guy nobody noticed, nobody thought about. The exterminator. Time to show them what happens when you ignore the man who knows where all the pests hide. The rain didn't stop for 3 days. It turned the city into something gray and miserable, the kind of weather that makes people stay inside and question their life choices. I spent that time in the motel room, monitoring the fallout. Social media made it easy. Corinne and Julian's world was small, incestuous, the kind of tight social circle where everyone knows everyone else's business. By the morning after my phone call, the affair was the only thing anyone was talking about. Ashley had kicked Julian out. That much was public. She'd posted a cryptic message about betrayal and seeing people's true colors that got 200 comments in an hour. Corinne had gone dark on all platforms, which was probably smart. The few mutual friends who hadn't blocked her were posting things like, "Can't believe we didn't see it," and "Some people have no loyalty." I sat on the motel bed, scrolling through it all, drinking gas station coffee that tasted like hot aluminum. My phone rang. Unknown number. I let it go to voicemail. 3 more calls, same number. On the 4th, I answered. "What?" "Mr. Vance." The voice was professional, clipped. "This is Robert Chen from Hillcrest Properties Management. I'm calling regarding your service contract with our residential accounts." I knew what was coming. "Yeah?" "We've decided to terminate our agreement, effective immediately. We'll be contracting with a different pest control provider going forward." "Can I ask why?" A pause. "We feel it's in the best interest of our clients to make a change. You'll receive a formal notice by email within the hour." He hung up. I stared at the phone. Hillcrest managed 15 properties I serviced. That was close to 20% of my monthly revenue. The email came 10 minutes later. Professional, giving me 30 days to remove my equipment from their properties. No explanation beyond business reasons. 2 hours later, I got another call. Sunset Estates Association. Same script. Contract terminated. Then Riverside Management. Then individual clients. Mrs. Patterson, whose basement I'd cleared of carpenter ants last spring. Mr. Alvarez, whose restaurant I'd been treating monthly for 5 years. One by one, they called with variations of the same message. "We appreciate your service, but we've decided to go in a different direction." By sunset, I'd lost 32 accounts. I didn't need to guess who was behind it. Julian Trent was a developer, which meant he knew every property manager, every homeowners association president, every business owner in the wealthy parts of town. One phone call from him. "This guy's unstable, going through a nasty divorce. I wouldn't trust him in your house." And that was it. Reputation destroyed. The rain kept falling. I sat in the dark motel room, watching the neon sign across the street flicker, flicker, and felt something shift inside me. Something that had been bent and compressed for years, held in place by the weight of trying to be a good man, a professional, someone who played by the rules. It snapped. I grabbed my keys and headed out into the rain. Julian's company, Trent Development, was in the middle of building a luxury townhouse complex on the east side. I'd done the pre-construction pest treatment 6 months ago, which meant I had the gate codes, the lockbox combinations, and a complete map of the property. The model home sat at the front of the development, lit up like a Christmas display. Julian was hosting an open house tomorrow. Potential investors, realtors, the press. It was supposed to be his big moment, the project that would establish him as a serious player in the luxury market. I parked 3 blocks away and walked through the rain. My work coveralls were dark blue, anonymous. I looked like maintenance, like someone who belonged. The gate code still worked. The lockbox on the model home's back door still had the same combination. I let myself in. The place was immaculate. Hardwood floors, granite countertops, a wine fridge that probably cost more than my van. Everything staged to perfection, from the artfully arranged books on the shelf to the fake flowers in the vase on the dining table. I stood there dripping on the expensive floor and smiled. My van was parked down the street, loaded with everything I needed. I made 3 trips, carrying in plastic containers and sealed bags. The rain covered any sound I made. The development was deserted, just empty lots and skeletal frames of houses waiting to be finished. In the basement, I found the HVAC system. It was state-of-the-art, designed to heat and cool the entire 3-story model home efficiently. The ductwork was accessible, easy to work with. Perfect. I opened the first container, 5,000 crickets, farm-raised, packed in breathing mesh bags. They'd been sitting in my climate-controlled storage unit for a job that fell through. I'd almost released them last week, but something told me to wait. Good instinct. I opened the bags and dumped them into the main supply duct. They scattered immediately, disappearing into the darkness. Their chirping filled the basement like an alarm. The second container held German cockroaches. 3 breeding colonies, maybe 2,000 individuals. They went into the return ducts, where they'd spread throughout the house looking for food and water. The third container was special. Carpenter ants, harvested from a tree on a rural property. Aggressive, destructive, and nearly impossible to eliminate once they established a colony. I released them in the walls, where they'd tunnel through the expensive lumber and start building their nests. I worked methodically, releasing insects into every accessible duct, every wall cavity, every space behind the pristine drywall. When I was done, the house looked exactly the same from the outside. But inside the walls, in the darkness behind the staged furniture and the perfect paint, an infestation was beginning. I locked up and walked back to my van. The rain had slowed to a drizzle. My phone showed it was 2 a.m. I drove back to the motel, stripped off my wet clothes, and slept better than I had in months. I wasn't there to see it, but I heard about it from 4 different sources. The open house started at noon. Julian had invited the local business press, 3 investment groups, and a dozen high-end realtors. He gave a speech on the front lawn about luxury living and modern elegance. Then he led them all inside. According to the article in the Business Journal, the event was disrupted by an apparent pest control issue. That was putting it mildly. Melissa, Corinne's friend who'd been at the party, posted a video to her Instagram story. I watched it a dozen times. You could see Julian in his expensive suit, gesturing toward the kitchen, talking about the imported tile. Then someone screamed. The camera swung wildly, and there were crickets everywhere, on the floor, on the walls, jumping onto people's shoulders. A woman in a white dress was swatting at her hair. A man in a suit was stamping his feet, trying to crush them. And then the cockroaches appeared. The video cut off, but the comments told the story. Absolutely disgusting. How did this pass inspection? Trent Development is a joke. The investors left. The realtors left. By the time an actual pest control company arrived, not mine, obviously, the damage was done. Photos had been posted online. The local news picked it up as a human interest story. Luxury development overrun by pests. Julian's company issued a statement blaming the construction crew, the previous pest control provider, even the weather. Nobody believed it. I sat in the motel room, eating Chinese takeout from a styrofoam container, and watched the story spread across social media. Julian's professional reputation was taking the same beating mine had taken. Maybe worse. My phone rang. Another unknown number. I answered this time. "You think you're clever?" Julian's voice was tight, controlled fury. "You think I don't know this was you?" "I don't know what you're talking about," I said. "I'm just an exterminator. Maybe you should have hired a better one." "I will destroy you. I will take everything you have left. I will—" "You already tried that," I said. "You took my clients. You took my wife. What else is there?" He hung up. I finished my takeout, tossed the container in the trash, and lay back on the bed. The ceiling had water stains in the shape of something that might have been a dog or a cloud, depending on how you looked at it. This wasn't over. Not even close. Julian was a businessman, which meant he understood leverage and power. He'd already proven he could hurt me professionally. Now he'd escalate. I needed to escalate first. My phone buzzed, a text from a number I didn't recognize. "This is Ashley. We need to talk." I stared at it for a long time before responding. "About what?" "About my husband. And your wife. And what happens next." "Nothing happens next," I typed. "They already lost." "That's where you're wrong," she replied. "Meet me tomorrow, the coffee shop on Briarwood, 2 p.m. I almost said no. Almost deleted the message and blocked the number. But curiosity got the better of me. "Fine," I sent back. The coffee shop was neutral territory, the kind of place where professionals met for business lunches. Ashley was already there when I arrived, sitting at a corner table with a cup of something that steamed in the afternoon air. She looked different from the last time I'd seen her. Thinner, with dark circles under her eyes that makeup couldn't quite hide. "Thank you for coming," she said as I sat down. "Wasn't sure I would." "I wouldn't have blamed you." She wrapped both hands around her cup. "I've been thinking about what you said on that phone call, about hearing them together." "Yeah? Were you really there? In the house?" "I was checking the crawl space. I heard them through the vent." She nodded slowly. "Julian told me you were lying, that you made it all up to hurt Corinne. But I knew. I'd known for weeks, really. I just didn't want to believe it." "I'm sorry," I said, and meant it. "Don't be. You did me a favor." She looked up, and her eyes were hard. "But here's the thing. Julian thinks this is over. He thinks he lost some investors and some face, but he can rebuild. He's already talking to his lawyers about suing you for the pest incident. He can try. He's also liquidating assets, hiding money in offshore accounts. He knows I'm going to take him to the cleaners in the divorce, so he's making sure there's nothing for me to take." I leaned back in my chair. "Why are you telling me this?" "Because I want you to know where to hit him." She pulled out her phone, scrolled through something, then turned it toward me. It was a photo of a document. Bank statements, account numbers, transaction records. He keeps everything on his personal laptop. The passwords are all the same, capital T, R, E, N, T, and the year he started his company. I looked at the phone, then at her. "You want me to steal from him?" "I want you to finish what you started. He's planning something, Arthur. He told me last night, when he came by to get some of his things. He said you were going to regret ever crossing him. He's hiring people, not lawyers, the other kind." My stomach tightened. "What kind?" "The kind who solve problems quietly." She stood up, left a $10 bill on the table. "I don't know what you did to his model home, and I don't want to know. But whatever you're planning next, do it fast, before he does something to you." She walked out. I sat there for another 10 minutes, staring at the photo she'd sent me. Bank accounts in the Cayman Islands, wire transfers to shell companies. Enough evidence to put Julian in prison for tax fraud, maybe worse. Ashley had just handed me the nuclear option. The question was whether I had the guts to use it. Julian's construction site, the one everyone called the Tower, even though it was only 12 stories, sat on the north edge of downtown. It was supposed to be luxury condos, the kind of place where tech executives and doctors would pay $1 million for a view of the river. Right now, it was just a concrete skeleton, rebar and unfinished floors, wrapped in construction fencing and warning signs. I'd done the foundation treatment back in March. I still had the access codes. I waited until midnight. The rain had stopped, but the air was still humid, pressing down like a wet blanket. My van was parked 2 blocks away, in a lot that belonged to a closed-down grocery store. I walked to the site carrying a backpack with my tools, flashlights, climbing rope, the night vision monocular I used for attic inspections. The fence was easy. The padlock was the same one from 6 months ago, and I still had the key. I slipped inside, closed the gate behind me, and disappeared into the shadows of the construction site. The building was dark, no power yet, no lights except for the dim glow of the city reflecting off the bare concrete. I climbed the emergency stairs to the 10th floor, where Julian's site office was located in a trailer that had been crane lifted up and secured to the floor. The trailer door was locked, but I'd learned to pick simple locks years ago. It took me 90 seconds. Inside, the office was exactly what I expected. Desk, filing cabinets, a laptop sitting closed on a stack of blueprints. I opened the laptop, powered it on, and waited for the login screen. Trent 2019. I was in. The files were organized, methodical. Construction budgets, investor agreements, building permits, and buried in a folder labeled Personal, I found what Ashley had told me about. Bank statements showing transfers to offshore accounts, invoices for work that was never done, payouts to inspectors who'd signed off on substandard materials. I plugged in a USB drive and started copying everything. That's when I heard the door to the stairwell open. I froze. Footsteps on concrete, multiple people, moving fast. Voices, low and professional, the kind of voices security guards use when they're trying to coordinate without shouting. 10th floor, the trailer. Julian had hired people. Ashley had been right. I yanked the USB drive out, shoved the laptop back where I'd found it, and my flashlight. The trailer had 2 windows, both facing the interior of the construction site. I moved to the far window, the one that overlooked the gap between the tower and the building next door. The footsteps were getting closer. I opened the window as quietly as I could. 10 stories up, the ground was invisible in the darkness. The building next to the tower was an old warehouse, maybe 30 feet away. Its roof was flat, covered in gravel and HVAC units. I climbed out onto the window ledge. The door to the trailer burst open. Flashlight beams cut through the darkness. I jumped. I hit the warehouse roof hard, rolled, and came up with my shoulder screaming. Gravel sprayed around me. Behind me, someone was shouting. A flashlight beam swept across the gap between buildings, searching. I ran. The warehouse roof was a maze of ductwork and exhaust vents. I dodged around them, heading for the fire escape on the far side. My shoulder throbbed with every step, but I couldn't stop. Couldn't slow down. A gunshot cracked through the night. I didn't know if they were shooting at me or trying to scare me. Didn't matter. I hit the fire escape and took the stairs 3 at a time, my boots ringing on the metal grating. By the time I reached the ground, I could hear sirens in the distance. Someone had called the cops. Maybe building security, maybe a neighbor who'd heard the shot. I ran through alleys and side streets, putting distance between myself and the tower. My van was still in the grocery store lot, untouched. I climbed inside, started the engine, and drove. No destination. Just away. My phone buzzed. A number I didn't recognize. I almost didn't answer, but something made me pick up. "They tried to you." Ashley's voice tight with fear. "How did you..." Julian called me, drunk, bragging. He said his security team had you cornered at the construction site. Are you okay? I'm fine. You need to go to the police. And tell them what? That I broke into a construction site and got chased off? That'll go well. She was quiet for a moment. I'm sorry. I didn't think he'd actually... It's not your fault. I turned onto the highway, heading south out of the city. But you were right. He's not going to stop. So what are you going to do? Good question. I had evidence of Julian's financial crimes on the USB drive in my pocket. I could go to the police, the IRS, the FBI, let the system handle it. But the system moved slow. And while it was moving, Julian would be free to come after me again. I'm going to finish this, I said. How? I looked at the USB drive sitting in my cup holder. Then I looked at the containers of chemicals secured in the back of my van. Pesticides, herbicides, marking dyes, the tools of my trade. You'll see, I said, and hung up. I drove to a truck stop outside the city, parked in the back lot with the other vans and semis, and opened my laptop. The USB drive had everything: bank records, tax documents, emails between Julian and his accountant discussing how to hide income from his wife and the government. It took me an hour to compile it all into a single folder. Then I created an anonymous email account and sent copies to the IRS, the state attorney general, and a journalist at the local paper who'd written several exposés on corrupt developers. The subject line was simple: Financial Crimes of Julian Trent, Trent Development. I hit send and closed the laptop. That was the legal part. The part where I played by the rules. Now came the other part. The next morning, I drove back to the city. My shoulder was stiff, bruised deep purple from where I'd landed on the warehouse roof, but I could move it. That was enough. Julian's personal residence, the mansion I'd been servicing for 2 years, sat in a gated community called Oakmont Heights. I still had the security code. I still had the key. I waited until mid-morning, when I knew he'd be at his office trying to manage the fallout from the tower incident. Then I drove through the gate like I belonged there and parked in his driveway. The house was empty. Corinne wasn't living here. She'd been staying with friends, probably burning through what little social capital she had left. Julian was alone. I let myself in through the side door. The place still smelled like money, but now there was an edge of desperation to it. Dishes in the sink, mail piled on the counter. The wine cellar where I'd hidden 6 months ago was open, bottles pulled out and left on the floor. I wasn't here for revenge. Not the physical kind, anyway. I went to the crawl space, the one I knew so well, pulled up the access panel and climbed down into the darkness. My flashlight beam cut through the shadows, illuminating the pipes and ductwork I'd installed years ago. And there, exactly where I remembered it, was the wall safe. Julian thought he was clever. He'd had it installed behind a false panel during a renovation, thinking nobody would ever notice. But I'd been there when the contractors cut through the wall. I'd watched them drill the holes for the pest control barriers. I'd seen exactly where they put it. I pulled out my tools and went to work. The safe wasn't high-end. It was a residential model, meant to stop opportunistic thieves, not professionals. I had it open in 20 minutes. Inside, cash, jewelry, and a leather portfolio stuffed with documents. I left the cash and jewelry. Took the portfolio. Insurance fraud. That's what the documents revealed. Julian had filed claims for water damage that never happened, theft that was staged, construction delays that were fabricated. He'd collected hundreds of thousands in fraudulent payouts over the years. I photographed every page, added them to the folder I'd sent to the authorities, and sent an update email. Then I put everything back exactly as I'd found it, and left. Julian would eventually realize the safe had been compromised. But by then, it would be too late. The IRS moved faster than I expected. 3 days after I sent the evidence, they raided Julian's office. The local news covered it. Federal agents carrying boxes out of Trent Development's headquarters, Julian standing on the sidewalk in a wrinkled suit, shouting about harassment and false accusations. Ashley sent me a text. "Thank you." I didn't respond. Corinne called from a new number. I let it go to voicemail. She left a message. "This is your fault. All of this. You ruined my life. You ruined Julian's life. You ruined everything. I hope you're happy." I deleted it. The motel room had become my headquarters. I'd been there for 2 weeks now, and the manager had stopped asking questions about the weekly rate. I spent my days monitoring the news, tracking the investigation, watching Julian's world collapse. His construction projects were being audited. His investors were pulling out. His business accounts were frozen pending the criminal investigation. And then the story broke about the affair. Someone, I suspected Ashley, though I had no proof, had leaked it to the press. Not the tabloids, but the legitimate business section of the paper. An article about Julian's pattern of ethical lapses that included his relationship with a client's wife while still married. The comment section was brutal. Julian was finished in this city. Even if he somehow avoided prison, he'd never work in real estate again. I should have felt satisfied, vindicated. But mostly I just felt tired. My phone rang. Unknown number. I almost didn't answer. "Arthur Vance?" A woman's voice, professional. "Yeah. This is Detective Sarah Morrison with the city police. I need to ask you some questions about an incident at a construction site last week. Are you available to come to the station?" My chest tightened. "What incident?" "The tower development. Security footage shows someone matching your description breaking into the site office. We have some questions." "I'll need to call my lawyer," I said. "Of course. We're not accusing you of anything. We just want to talk." I hung up and sat there, staring at the phone. This was it. The moment where I had to decide if I was going all the way or backing down. I could go to the police, admit what I'd done, hope they'd be lenient given the circumstances, or I could run, disappear, start over somewhere else, or I could finish it. I grabbed my keys and headed out. Julian's mother lived in a modest house on the west side of town. I'd serviced it twice, once for termites, once for a wasp nest in the attic. She was a quiet woman, religious, the kind who made you take your shoes off before coming inside. I knocked on her door at 7 p.m., dressed in clean clothes, my work ID visible on my belt. She answered, squinting through the screen door. "Yes?" "Mrs. Trent, I'm Arthur Vance. I did your pest control last year. I wondered if I could talk to you about your son." Her face hardened. "I don't want to talk about Julian." "I understand. But I have some information you need to hear, about what he's been doing, about who he really is." She stared at me for a long moment. Then she unlatched the screen door. 5 minutes. I told her everything. The affair with my wife, the financial crimes, the insurance fraud. I showed her the documents on my phone, proof of every lie, every scheme, every betrayal. She listened without interrupting. When I finished, she sat back in her chair and closed her eyes. "I raised him better than this," she said quietly. "I know. His father would be ashamed." "Yes, ma'am." She opened her eyes and looked at me. "What do you want from me?" "Nothing. I just thought you should know the truth, before you hear it from someone else." I left her sitting there, hands folded in her lap, staring at nothing. The next morning, Julian's mother called a press conference. She stood on her front porch, facing cameras from 3 local stations, and disowned her son. She said she'd raised him to have integrity and honor, and he'd betrayed everything she'd taught him. She said she supported the investigation and hoped justice would be served. It was devastating. Not for the legal case, that was already solid, but for Julian's reputation, his own mother publicly cutting him off. I watched the coverage from the motel room and felt something close to peace. The police called again. This time I went in voluntarily, with a lawyer Ashley had recommended. I admitted to entering the construction site without permission, I explained that I'd been trying to recover tools I'd left there during the foundation treatment months ago. I didn't mention the safe, the documents, or anything else. They had security footage showing me at the site, but it was grainy and dark. They had no proof I'd been in the office trailer. Without evidence of theft or vandalism, they couldn't charge me with much more than trespassing. My lawyer negotiated a misdemeanor plea with a fine and probation, no jail time. Julian wasn't so lucky. The IRS investigation led to federal charges: tax evasion, wire fraud, insurance fraud. His lawyer tried to make a deal, but with the evidence so overwhelming, the prosecutor wasn't interested. Last I heard, he was facing 15 years. Corinne called one last time. I answered. "I have nothing," she said. Her voice was hollow. "No money, no friends, nowhere to go." "That's not my problem. Please, Arthur, I know I was wrong, I know I hurt you, but please, I need help." "You should have thought about that before," I said. "Before you laughed at me with your friends, before you planned to take everything I'd built, before you forgot that the invisible man sees everything." I hung up and blocked the number. The divorce was finalized 3 months later. Corinne got nothing. The house was mine before the marriage, the business was mine, and the prenup she'd signed without reading protected everything else. She contested it, but her lawyer couldn't do much without money. Last I heard, she'd moved back in with her parents in another state. I rebuilt my business slowly. Some of my old clients came back, apologetic. New clients hired me based on reputation, not Julian's smear campaign, but the original reputation I'd built through years of hard work. Ashley sent me a Christmas card. She'd gotten everything in her divorce from Julian: the house, the cars, half his remaining business assets. She thanked me again for telling the truth. I didn't respond, but I kept the card. On a cold January evening, I drove past the tower. Construction had stopped months ago, the building standing there like a tombstone to Julian's ambitions. The city was trying to figure out what to do with it: finish it under new management or tear it down. I didn't care. I'd gotten what I wanted. Not revenge. That wasn't quite the right word. Extermination. That was better. I'd found the pests in my life, the ones hiding in the walls, feeding on what I'd built, destroying everything from the inside out. And I'd done what I did best. I'd eliminated them. I drove back to my house, the small, modest place that Corinne had hated. I parked my van in the driveway, noting that it needed washing. The porch light was on. Inside, everything was exactly as I'd left it. Small, practical, mine. I grabbed a beer from the fridge and sat on the back porch, watching the stars appear in the winter sky. My phone buzzed. A new client inquiry. Someone with a termite problem needed an estimate. I texted back, "I'll be there tomorrow." Then I finished my beer, went inside and went to bed. The pests were gone. The house was clean. Job done.